Hello again, 2303 students. We're back for another video regarding the textbook that I am going to mention or call to your attention relationships between a figure in chapter 2 and a figure in chapter 3. Let's actually begin with the figure in chapter 3. It's figure 3.7, and it's the classic chart or graph that illustrates the break-even point concept. Now, as you see in figure 3.7, the x-axis shows you volume of units sold, and the y-axis shows you money or dollars. When you first start your business and you haven't sold much, you are on the left-hand side, the far left side of this chart. Your total costs are much higher than your sales revenue. In other words, you're spending a lot more than you're making, and therefore you're losing money. But look what happens to that loss, that greenish, bluish area or region as you move from left to right on the chart. As your volume of sales grows and you move to the right, let's say you make it to 175 units sold. Well, the total cost line is still higher than the sales revenue line, meaning you're still spending more than you're receiving and you're still incurring a loss. But the loss is getting smaller. And if you continue to sell more and therefore move to the right, at the point where you sell precisely 225 units, the total cost line crosses the sales revenue line. In other words, what you're spending is finally equal to what you're taking in from your customer, and you have truly broken even. Now, of course, the purpose of any business is to make money, profits, and not just break even. So you will have to move to the right again and sell more than 225 units. As sales units increase, you continue moving to the right. Suddenly you are in that orange and slightly reddish area of the chart. Sales revenue, that line, is higher than your total cost revenue, and as a result, you start to make a profit. And as you move further and further to the right, you make more and more of a profit. Sound reasonable? Even intuitive? I think so. I hope you do too. But let me point out a fallacy, a conclusion that you might draw if you were to only rely on this figure instead of looking at another figure from chapter 2 in a way that I will illustrate shortly. The conclusion that you might draw from this chart is no matter what period of business growth you are in, whether you're a tiny startup business only selling a few products, or you're a large business selling many, you always can do better by selling more. Sell, sell, sell. Now you might think at first glance, wait a minute, what's wrong with that idea? Doesn't every business want to sell more? And the answer is not necessarily. Many, many, many businesses focus on sales growth. They grow too fast. They see their costs soar, jump, go out of control. They lose control of their business. and they go bankrupt. Now, for an illustration of that problem, let's look back in the textbook, back to chapter 2. And specifically, let's look at figure 2.22. Do you see that total cost line? Well, for the most part, it seems to be increasing moderately as you move from left to right, but somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 units sold, the cost line, takes a leap upwards. What actually happens at that very point? Well, in the preceding paragraph of the text, you can see that the company has reached a point in their stage of development where they need to spend a lot of money very quickly to keep the business going in a way that they may or may not have necessarily planned for. Things like that happen in the real world, and you get this temporary leap in the total cost curve or line to a much higher level. Okay, if that makes sense, if you can see that discordant leap in the cost line in figure 2.22, then now let's go back to what we were looking at in figure 3.7. Do you see how the total cost line in figure 3.7 is, well, it's increasing as you go from left to right, but we don't have that sudden leap in total costs that was illustrated in figure 2.22. Whoever came up with this chart in figure 3.7 simply assumed that that total cost line would stay relatively level in the way that you see it drawn here. But imagine, if you will, looking at that total cost line again, imagine that at, let's say 175 units, where the total cost line was higher than the sales revenue line, and you're losing money. Imagine that that total cost line at 175 units was to suddenly leap significantly before resuming its more gradual rate of increase thereafter. If that total cost line was to break with its pattern and leap upwards in the way that is illustrated in figure 2.22, then the loss that is being incurred at that point would be much bigger, and it would take the company much longer to break even. That is simply one illustration of situations where figure 3.7, the comparison of sales revenue and total costs, is drawn out in a visual way for purposes of identifying the break-even point. Figure 3.7 in the real world might be, and in fact often is, a lot more complicated than you see here. The lines are not necessarily straight lines. They often jump around in a jagged way, as was illustrated back in figure 2.22. And as you read through the chapters of the textbook, please keep in mind, you are seeing very often fundamental information presented to you, but it is up to you to pull different figures together. In this case, 2.22 and 3.7, to obtain a better understanding of the complexities of management accounting in the real world. I hope you enjoyed this peek or this reinterpretation of elements of chapters 2 and 3. I look forward to taking you into the next recording as we begin to look at chapters 4 and 5.